Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world. In 30 answers, discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I am in Los Olivos in the San Ynez Valley with Doug Margerum of Margerum Wines. Doug, welcome to Wine Soundtrack, and tell us a little bit about Margerum Wines.
Well, Margerum Wine Company was started in 2001. I set off on my own after being in a partnership with Jim Clendenin of Au Bon Climat, who's recently passed, as we know. Not so recent, but still fresh in my mind. And Bob Lindquist. And we made wines together from 1986 to 1998 under the Vita Nova brand. And we had a lot of fun, and we're great friends. We started that company, remained great friends, and Jim bought both Bob and I out, and we stayed great friends after that, which is one of those rare things when people get into business together, that they remain friends through all the ups and downs, and although there was a lot of ups, certainly. I was not the winemaker by any means. Sometimes they'd let me cook lunch, or sometimes they'd let me. I was very involved in the blending process and in the sales of the wine. But after Jim bought us out in '98, I decided to start my own brand in 2001. And by the graciousness of Fred Brander, he let me build a little spot within his winery, the back door of his shay. I built a wall, so there was a false wall, and then there was a little two-door exit from the little room there, and there was a little pad there, and it was 240 square feet. And I made wine with my little basket press, and I had half the room was super cold, and that was the cold room for the whites, and the other room was just refrigerated and was kept at 55 degrees, and that was for the reds. And I made about 220 cases my first year in 2001.
And here we are now, a couple decades later. How much wine do you make now?
I make about 28,000 cases of wine now.
Grew a little bit.
Yeah, we went from that 240 square foot spot, that was 1 to 5, and then we moved to a little spot above, which was then Curtis Winery, which is now Andrew Murray. There was a little building above there, which was about 2,400 square feet. Started making wine there, and that was owned by the Firestone family at the time, just the most wonderful people in the world. And then in 2012, they said, hey, we'd like to reuse this space for another purpose, and then I consolidated everything into Buellton. So now we have a barrel room in Buellton, a winery in Buellton with a kitchen and dining room, and then we have a warehouse and offices in Buellton. So we've been there since 2012.
Wow. And do you own any land, or do you purchase all your fruit?
I have a long-term lease with an option to buy of our Estate Vineyard, which we have complete control over the farming, and so we have a 20-year lease on that property. It's funny, I was just talking to the owners yesterday about what we might do or not do in the future as far as taking it over permanently. But there's a matriarch who loves to come up and visit the property, and she's just fabulous. And so I don't think we're going to do anything real soon.
And where exactly is that in the San Ynez Valley?
That's funny. It's on this exact same road we're on right now. We're on Alamo Pintado Road. So Alamo Pintado takes a big right turn when it hits Los Olivos. But if you leave Los Olivos, and Alamo Pintado takes a big left turn, and you drive down almost to Ballard, and the Margerum Estate Vineyard is right there. It's about 18 acres, and it's planted to 10 different Rhone varietals. So we have Grenache Blanc, Marsanne, Roussanne, Viognier, and Picpoul Blanc for the whites. And we have Syrah, 5 different clones of Syrah. 3 of the clones are own-rooted. 3 of the clones are co-planted with Viognier. And then we have Grenache, Mourvèdre, Cunoise, Cinsault, and I named all 5.
I know, I stopped counting on my fingers. And then you're purchasing from other vineyards. Are you working exclusively with Rhone varieties?
For Margerum, it's pretty exclusively Rhone varietals. Interestingly enough, when I got into it, I've been in the wine business for a long time because I had a restaurant that I started in 1981. Believe it or not, I was 12 years old.
Yeah, you're still a baby.
Still a baby. And I really loved serving Rhone varietals, and I really loved Loire Valley Sauvignon Blanc. So when it came time for me to make my own wine, I started out making Northern Rhone style Syrahs. Southern Rhone style Grenache-based blends and Grenache, a Grenache rosé, obviously. But then the white wine that we made was Sauvignon Blanc, because I really loved the Sauvignon Blancs from Happy Canyon. And this was a new burgeoning area, and I was one of the first to make Sauvignon Blanc out of that new, now it's its own AVA. But at that time, I had never really enjoyed or knew of any white Rhone wine that I really wanted to emulate. They're even the top producers, I just never found them compelling. Later on, I was consulting for a winery in the south of France, and one of our jobs was to choose 2 more white varietals to plant to supplement their planting of Roussanne and Viognier. Now, Roussanne and Viognier are the 2 sort of gooeyest white Rhone varietals,
right.
And so we were really looking for something to balance that out. And so it was actually Philippe Gambi and I were working at Chêne Bleu, near Vaison-la-Romaine, and we spent 3 days just tasting wines and traveling around to different wineries, mostly in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, but in Gigondas and Sablé and Séguret and Rasteau and all the Grand Cru area of the Southern Rhone. And that's when I really discovered there's some really great white Rhone blends out there. And when the time became available to take over the vineyard we're releasing right now, there's about 9 acres that are just flat, and I couldn't see planting red varietals on flat land like that. But white Rhone varietals would do very well on that, and it's all gravel.
And that's where the Picpoul came.
Exactly. So in Picpoul, I discovered in this process of working with Chêne Bleu, and so we planted 5 white Rhone varietals to make a companion to my flagship wine, which is M5 Red. Now we make it M5 White.
So you said, one more technical question or official question. You said that you're making a lot of wine, obviously have a bunch of different bottlings. Where are your wines available? Are they all in the market across the U.S., internationally? Are some wines distributed and some not?
We have very little in Germany. We do very well in Japan. We have a very good distributor in Japan. I was just there about a month ago. I love Japan. I love the market there. We are primarily, I would say, oddly enough, it's almost 75% direct to consumer for the Margerum brand, and then the Barden brand, which is the stuff all from Rita Hills, is about 100% direct to consumer. Very precious, very small production, very high quality wines. In fact, you're drinking one right now. You're having a Barden Blanc de Blanc.
And it's quite good. So you've been in the industry for a long time, but I'm curious, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
Very clear. I had a bad memory, probably I think 11 or 12 in the neighborhood, and we'd gotten some Boone's Farm apple thing. We drank it and threw up, and that was not a very, very good memory.
Well, one can't really say that's wine either.
Well, no, but it theoretically was, but it was horrifying. So my first start was a bad start, but then when I was a 14-year-old kid, my parents took all of us on the European vacation. I was a mistake child, so I came much later on, and so my older brother and sister immediately split, and I'm stuck with my parents in a Volkswagen Vanagon traveling around France. But one of our first stops was we went to this little village called Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and I was grumbly and unhappy and pimply-faced, long-haired little dick, and I didn't want to be with my parents. I wanted to be back home with my friends and not be in this place. But we went to Clos de Pape, and we went down this staircase into this dark cellar, and they gave us a tasse de vin, which is, the little silver goblet that you used to taste wine out of. And this winemaker spoke English, and with great flourish was taking the pipette out of the bung and pouring us taste out of the barrel into our little tasse de vins, and I'm tasting the stuff in this dark cellar.
And he let you taste at 14, which is even better.
Oh yeah, no, there's no restrictions, pretty much, if your parents allow it. And all of a sudden, I liked my parents better, and they liked me better, and I just, it was a true light bulb moment. I said, this is the most amazing stuff I'd ever tasted, and I never really had alcohol either, and that was really nice. And it was just an unbelievable experience. And then through that whole rest of the trip, my parents would let me drink wine at dinner and lunch when they were drinking wine. And then when I got home from that trip, I was now 15, I started collecting wines in my room. I was collecting Châteauneuf-du-Pape.
At 15?
At 15. I had a little. They aged quickly because we lived in Woodland Hills, California, which was quite warm. But then I would open those bottles for special occasions, like for Thanksgiving or for Christmas, and I would pour them for everybody. And so that brought a lot of attention to a young man. Like I poured wines for the
There are
family.
not a lot of 15-year-olds that collect wine.
No.
So you're no longer 15. You're a grown man. You obviously have traveled the world and drunk a lot of great wines. If we were to come to your home right now, what would we find in your wine cellar? Is it predominantly Rhone grapes? Is there a specific variety or region you like, or is it all over the world?
It's all over the world. I keep my cellar at the winery, so I don't have it at home.
Perfect temperature.
Yeah, it's a perfect temperature, and it also, prevents you from making terrible mistakes, or your friends making terrible mistakes. We do drink a lot of wine at the winery. We do entertain at the winery, so that we, I'll throw people the keys and say, go grab a bottle. But I would say it's an eclectic mix. I'm not a huge Spanish wine fan. I really love French wines, primarily Rhone and Burgundy and Champagne. I really like Northern Italian wines. I like Barbaresco Barolo, but I also like the lighter ones like the Longues and the.
You are just speaking my language.
I don't really drink much Bordeaux. I own a lot of Bordeaux, but I don't drink it that often. I rarely drink Napa Valley Cabernet, or I don't like dark, heavy, extracted, sweet, over-oaked, residual sugar wines, which cancels about half of California. But I do drink my friends' wines. There's a lot of really good producers around here that I enjoy drinking their wines. And I do a lot of trading with my neighbors here, and that's really fun to taste their wines. And I have a lot of favorites from around here. One, Ernst Storm, I'm a big fan of his. I'm a big fan of Story of Soil. And
anything you opened recently that drank really well?
Well, recently I'm just looking. We just drank a 2001 Musigny from De Vogue, which was drinking absolutely fabulous. I just had a Agripar Set Cru champagne for the Paris for the meteor shower that we just had 2 nights ago. I drink a lot of sake too. I really like dry Jumai or Jumai Daijingo sake, because I think it's not that far from Sauvignon Blanc actually. We had a Silex 10 recently from Dagenau at the winery for lunch.
This is the danger of asking a winemaker what they drank recently that they really like. They're like, oh, well, we started lunch yesterday, dinner last night, yesterday.
No, I'm just thinking about the wines I've had just in the last few days. We just had a Gevrey Chambertin Auvel from Denis Mortet. And
you drink well.
No, we drink well. I mean, I like wine. I like collecting wine, and I think it's very, very important to drink other people's wine. I just think if you don't get a sense of where you fit into that proposition. And I do like older wines. I think that's I like wines that have some age on them.
So, do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
Varietal.
Variety.
Variety. I think variety is the spice of life, and as a varietal, I mean, I think there's something pretty magical about Pinot Noir and all of its manifestations. It's such a holy grail grape, and I was always very reluctant to make Pinot Noir, and I still think, I don't think my lifetime will be enough to learn how to make the most. The Pinot Noirs like I've had from Pinot Noirs in Burgundy. I think I make some very, very good Pinot Noir, it's a little I still feel it's a little elusive. Whereas my Syrah and my Rhone Grenache blends, Grenache I feel very comfortable with, and I think I've made some great Grenaches. And I'm not really looking to do anything different. I like what I have, and I'm really proud of it. But Pinot Noir is just always an evolving situation as far as making it. But I do love Pinot Noir. Yeah.
Well, speaking of Grenache, speaking of sort of that elusive, aspirational of kind of perfection or something like that, what's your opinion on wine critics and scores?
Well, scores are kind of silly. I mean, because I just think I think it's a problem with Americans to some degree. Maybe I shouldn't bash Americans, but I think all people, we tend to vertically assign things. So a number score is really a great way to say, well, that was a 94, the other one was a 93, so you can assign it being better than the other one. Whereas if you're tasting maybe 3 or 4 wines, they have different purposes. I mean, some wines you want to age, some wines you want to have with food, sometimes you want to drink by the pool, some wines, I mean, all wines have a lot of different purposes and reasons. And so I look at wine in more of a global spreadsheet versus a linear or graphical way, because there's so many different reasons you have wines and enjoy wines. And so I'm not a big fan of the score, but obviously it helps. I mean, obviously it helps the consumer, so that's great. But I think you really have to love the wines that particular critic loves. And I tend to think that tasting wine for a living is not as good as drinking wine for a living. I think sometimes the wines that have the highest scores are the least compatible wine with the table. The wine you wouldn't want to have with a really fine, seared ahi tuna and risotto and maybe some crispy leeks and maybe even Asian influence with like ponzu sauce. You wouldn't want to drink a high-scoring wine for that. And so I'm like Mr. 89 to 92 guy. Unbelievably, my wines get higher scores than that, but I tend to like wines that have those kind of numbers in them because they're wines that they oftentimes get overlooked in a blind tasting or in a where you're tasting a whole bunch of wines.
Yeah, they're not quite showboats. No,
exactly right. So my old saying is that wines that win tastings or in a big blind tasting, or you have 10 wines in a row, are the wines that stand out. They're not the wines that are outstanding. The outstanding wine gets hidden in that framework, and so when you're looking at wines with 16% alcohol or 1.5% residual sugar, or lots of wood, lots of extraction, those wines you taste a tablespoon of that, like, God, that is so good. But imagine drinking that with some nice, beautiful food, a nice, delicate meal, or a perfectly prepared cuisine from a chef, and you really rarely want to drink something in that vein,
right?
And they don't age either. A lot of these big wines that are over alcohol and over extracted, they just don't age. And I think and Jim, this was Jim's feeling too. My mentor, Jim Clendenin, he always felt that the real test of a great wine is its ability to age. And so I'm now 23 years. I'm starting my 23rd harvest this year, and we've done verticals of M5 back to the beginning, and every wine's sound, and some are great. Some seems like they've hardly aged at all. So I'm very proud of being able to make wines that age and people can have in their cellar and pull corks on and still enjoy them.
I'm curious. Quick answer: as a consumer, red, white, or rosé?
For what?
As a drinker.
Oh, I don't know. I think I obviously, again, it's a global issue because if it's 90 degrees outside, you probably shouldn't be drinking a big, heavy red wine.
So you're in all of the above.
Yeah, I'm in all of the above. I think today is a really good rosé day or a sparkling wine like we're drinking right now. It's really refreshing. It's crisp. It's dry, and it goes with the weather. But I don't really believe in that. I don't think there's one flavor of wine that I drink all three. Yeah, and sparkling.
You were talking a minute ago about food wines or wines that go better with food versus some of these higher scoring wines that might not be great food pairings. I'm wondering, how do you approach pairing wine with food? Are there rules that you follow? Do you think that it's red wine and meat, white wine and fish? Do you look for something in the food or something in the wine? What do you do? I think you want the same balance in the food as you do in the wine. Obviously, braised short rib needs a bigger, darker, more tannic wine. Ribeye versus hanger steak, you want a different tannin structure in those wines and a different flavor profile. So I think some of the general rules are really good to live by. I mean, obviously, I think drinking a Sancerre with a ribeye, it just doesn't quite work because the acidity doesn't help the fat of the ribeye steak. Mm-hmm. So those are good rules, but you also have to go outside of the box and try new things. But certainly the balance of the food needs to match the balance of the wine, and that seems to be a good rule of thumb. And we do pairing all the time, and we do a dinner a month at our tasting room, which it's all we do is pair the food with the wine, and it really I think
what I try and tell chefs is about my wine is I say that my wine makes your food taste better. Because I'm not trying to dominate the table. I'm not trying to dominate the plate. Because if you taste, if you have a big 16% alcohol Zinfandel, it's rarely a food item you can find. Yeah, you could Gorgonzola maybe would be great with that, or Gorgonzola tart. I mean, like Amarone, it does go with really strong cheeses, but it's a wine that doesn't really work with a lot of food. Mm-hmm. So I think, and then also you need to go from light to heavy. You can't start with a heavy wine and then go back to a light wine. So when you're pairing wine with food, you want to start off with something that's dry and light and move up the scale.
Well, you've spoken a little bit about this and kind of your style of wines, but for somebody who hasn't had the pleasure of tasting Margerum wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on?
I think we tend to have a Cabernet arm and a Chardonnay arm. And I think some of these blends are really, really neat explorations of wine. And so M5 Red is a Grenache-based red wine blend that really has a lot of complexities to it and a lot of different aromatics that are just not found in a single varietal wine because they have 5 different varietals in it. Mm-hmm. So I think just for Margerum especially, you're missing out on trying some really unique wines that not a lot of people produce in California.
And if space aliens were to land on your property and come here to Los Olivos and come knocking on your door, which of your wines would you want to welcome them with?
Well, I always phrase that in the what would be my desert island wine.
Oh, I have a question like that. That's coming.
So so I'll leave that then. But for space aliens.
It says, "Welcome to Margerum." This is us.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess it would have to be. I mean, I'd probably start them out in rosé, just like I would start anyone else out, space alien or not. You should start with the rosé. It's refreshing. It's bright. It's really good. It'll make you happy. It doesn't have a lot of alcohol in it. I don't know what space aliens' tolerance to alcohol is, but you might as well start low.
You said, start lighter and go bigger.
Yeah. So I'd probably offer them some Riviera rosé. Yeah.
And it's quite a delicious rosé, so anyone would be happy to get that.
I think so.
So you've been doing this for a long time. You've been making wine now. You said you're coming on your 23rd vintage, and you have a long-term lease with the vineyard that you spend a lot of time with, and of course you spend time in the other vineyards. But you've been in this area for a long time, and we know that every vintage tells a different story. But do you find that there's more commonality year to year or big variation?
It's gotten not as consistent. So I'm probably, my first vintage with Jim and those guys up there, was probably, before we even started our partnership, so in the early 80s. And it seemed like, harvest always started the last week in August. That was when you'd pick sparkling or pick Sauvignon Blanc, and that was just almost a given. And then in the last 10 years, it's been very dramatically different. I mean, the weather is definitely different. I mean, I used to ski. I used to count on skiing in Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. We don't ski in Thanksgiving anymore. No. There's never snow. So sometimes, what's happening here in the Mediterranean zone, especially, is we're not having one way or the other. It seems like we're getting either it's really hot or it's really cold. And so 19 was super cold. And then 20 was super hot, unrelentingly hot. And then 21 was super cold. And then 22 was cold. I mean, hot, stupidly hot. And then it turned into a winter, and we could barely ripen anything. So it just seems like we're in a much more of a roller coaster kind of weather pattern. I think for the entire world, that's probably the true. And it's become more intense in the last 5 to 10 years than sometimes we'd have a week later or a week earlier. We'd have some, we're right in this little zone right here where we're north meets south. Mm-hmm. The Point Conception goes out here, and we're in these valleys that run east and west, and so we're right in the middle part of where we're either getting south or we're getting north. So most of the trade winds come from the north, and that's why we have these beautiful beautiful cold climate here. They're blowing right over the ocean, off the cold Pacific Ocean, and up into this valley, the main valley I work with, which is the San Ynez Valley. And so we have a really cold and really temperate climate for growing grapes. It's fantastic. Mm-hmm. But in the fall, we get pressure from the south. And so we had rain last week. We had an August tropical storm.
Wow.
And that's just bizarre. And we have El Nino now, so there's a lot of warm water pressure coming up from the south, which will draw these storms coming up. So I think this will be a vintage sort of like 10 was, where we're going to have a lot of rain throughout the harvest, and we just, you just got to stop and wait and let the winds dry everything back out and go again. But I think we're really late this year from when we're going to be able to pick the grapes. It'll probably be a month. It'll probably be the third week or late September till we really get going, which is almost a month later than normal, and there's no normal anymore. But I think we'll see. I think we're going to get a lot of southern pressure. I'm feeling southern pressure right now. There's moisture in the air.
And there's moisture in the air and the wind's blowing.
Yeah.
I'm curious, are there any signs or predictors that you look for that's going to tell you what a harvest is going to give you?
Yeah, I mean, El Nino and La Nina are really big predictors. When we get a lot of early signs, how when we get first leaf and when we get flowering and we get set and we get veraison, so you're able to measure all the way along, like when do you think things are going to happen. And this year, the first 6 months of the year were extremely cold, and the grapevines did not get the message that it was spring, much less summer, and they leafed and came out very, very late. So it's going to be if you crop correctly and you try not to set too much crop, you can ripen your fruit. But anyone who tries to get greedy and tries to ripen a lot of fruit in a year like this, there's just not going to be enough daylight days. I mean, even now, even here in August, where every day is shorter, and that means less sunlight. And it's still warm, thank goodness, but the sun is going down.
In all the years you've been doing this, have you set up any good luck rituals that you do at the start of harvest, whether for yourself or for you and your team?
Yeah, we always open a bottle of champagne.
Of course. Not your own?
No, usually someone else's. Always someone else's. And we pour a little champagne on the first grapes, and then we all have a big toast, and we take a portrait of the whole team, and that's it. The harvest is starting, and then from there it's just like any other activity. It's like a wedding. All of a sudden it's like December. It's like, whoa, what happened? And but that's our biggest ritual is doing that. We do love to. We make 168 cases approximately of Riesling a year. We bring that in and we all foot stomp it, which is a really nice ritual that we all take off our clothes, or not our underpants, and we all jump on the grapes and get a little bit of botrytis out of it. We eat lunch together every day. We have wine together, and we generally, if we're pressing Sauvignon Blanc or picking Sauvignon Blanc, we'll drink some terroir wine or something Sauvignon Blanc-ish from someone else. And then if it's Pinot Noir day, we'll pick out a Pinot Noir. And so we try and drink the wine that we're making, just sort of get in the mood.
I love how you continue it kind of throughout, and it's great because having worked a harvest, I know how much labor, how much physical it is. So it's really nice to think about just celebrating, taking a break, and enjoying more wine.
Well, and lunch is just, it's the best part of the day. Remember, you're working really hard. It's cold. It's sticky. It's hard work. It's it's a factory. I mean, I hate to say it. There's a lot of cleaning. It's very wet. It's very cold. And then when you get to come in and sit down and have a really big cassoulet with big bread and butter and cheese and a big salad and you've got steamed vegetables and everyone's sitting around eating all this food and laughing and telling jokes, and it's such a good break. And I just remember when I worked in France, I just loved. That was my favorite thing, was to go in and have lunch.
I love it.
Because I was working so hard, and it's just finally just to take this real honest break, and everyone's just starving to death.
When you go into the vineyard, you spend time in the vineyards, or maybe this is when you're in the winery, but have you ever been accused of talking to your vines or talking to your wines? Do you have any communication with them?
No.
I
mean, I talk to myself, but no, I don't really talk to vines or wines. I do have music that I like to play, and I don't allow country music. Sadly, for half the population, it's not going to hate me. But I don't want to hear twanging and heartbreak and broken down trucks and their dogs.
Because you don't want your wine to hear twanging.
Exactly right.
Get it.
So we play really good music in the winery and sort of progressive rock but no, I don't talk to the grapes. Although I was making lattes the other day, and I I thanked the grinder. And so I'm like, did you just thank the grinder? I'm like, yeah, I did. I mean, so maybe I do,
maybe
and I'm not conscious of it.
That's right. So you said you started collecting wine when you were 15 years old. Mm-hmm. Did you know you wanted to work in the wine industry that early, or what did you want to be when you grew up? When you were a little boy, what did you want to be?
Well, I even at that time, being in the wine business was not even a thought. I didn't think that was even a possibility, mm-hmm. And so I liked wine, and I also, around that era is when I started working in restaurants and either front of the house or back of the house, and I really liked cooking, but I also really liked talking to people and serving people too. So I was kind of a 50-50 guy on that thing, and so I'd either work as a cook or I'd work as a server, and that's how I got myself through high school and through college. But I did have an influential situation with a meeting of a young woman in my senior year of high school who was an exchange student, and then I subsequently spent the next few summers with her in France. She lived in Paris, and her folks had a guest house, and her aunt had a guest house in La Ciotat in the south of France near Cassis, and then her brother lived in Le Havre in Normandy. And so she was in the book business, so she was a children's book editor, and so we'd go to the book fairs in Frankfurt and London. It was really, I mean, I was 17 years old, and then subsequently 18. But then, so for 3 years, I'd go over and we drank wine, and we'd go to wineries, and we'd travel and go to these. In the London scene, that was the first time I've ever been to a wine bar, was in London, and thought that was really unique. It didn't exist in America. It did not exist until the London Wine Bar opened, I think in 1979 in San Francisco. It was the first wine bar in America. I think I opened the second one when we opened the Wine Cask in 1981. What was the question?
Just, how you knew what you wanted to be when you grew up.
Yeah,
but it sounds like hospitality, and in some way this was always part of your blood.
That was always a means to an end. But so my plan was, even after graduating from college, I got a degree in economics. My plan was to go to business school and get my MBA, and I thought I'd be in finance. That was really what was my plan, to be either in Wall Street or, and make a bunch of money and whatever. But that was my plan. I was really into the stock market, and I really loved math, and I love statistics in college, and so but then when I graduated from college, this opportunity to open a wine bar, it's a long story.
Yeah,
but I got an opportunity to open a wine bar. My father said, hey, just take a year off and do this wine bar, and you can sell it, and then you'll have so much more life experience, because then I was 20. I'm still quite young.
Yeah.
And then you can go to grad school and get your MBA when you're 21 or 22, and then you'll be so much more ready to do that than you would be going to grad school at 20 years old. I was just I was young, really young.
And here you are all these years later.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, when you're not working, how do you like to spend your free time?
I really like to walk. Do a lot of walking. I've been playing a lot of paddle ball, which has been fun. What's pickleball? Excuse me.
Pickleball.
Oh,
yes, the very trendy pickleball.
Well, I know. I was trying to look for cripple ball, because I haven't played for 2 weeks because I pulled my hamstring so severely. I like going out to eat with friends and people, and entertaining. And I don't know. I don't have a lot of crazy interests. I like sailing, going out in the boats, and like hiking.
So you mentioned that, when you look back, you talked a little bit about what you're proud of. And I'm curious, when you look back at your work life.
That was very disruptive.
Another winemaker.
Yep.
When you look back at your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date? I mean, you've referred to a little bit some proud moments, but I'm curious if there's one thing that stands out.
Well, winning the grand award for the restaurant for the wine list was a huge thing, and then moving back to New York, and that was a giant moment, for a little restaurant in Santa Barbara to be one of 87 restaurants in the world to have the Grand Award. I mean, those are usually reserved for restaurants in Tokyo and Singapore and New York and Chicago. And so getting the Grand Award was a really unbelievable career achievement for that wine list that we put together at the Wine Cask. And that took years to collect those wines and curate that wine list. And it was an incredible wine list. The Winemaker of the Year nomination last year was quite good. I was just the nominee. I didn't win. But still, that was a good achievement. The Gourmet magazine article, when Gourmet wrote us up first time in the early '80s about the restaurant, what incredibly cutting edge, neat cuisine and food, wine pairing it was, and I think that was a good moment.
I think you've had a few.
A few.
A few. Quite an illustrious career. So, when we think about our careers, our lives, or whatever, people give us advice all the time. It could be a family member, a teacher. Is there a piece of advice someone gave you along the way that you try to live your life by or work by?
Yeah, I think, and that's also the advice I now give to all my mentees, which I have a bunch of them around here. Be authentic, obviously. I always felt like I treat people like they're coming into my home as much as they're coming into my either restaurant or my wine shop or my tasting room or my winery. Under promise, over deliver. It's a big one. It's just that. I have a whole bunch of them. They seem to just come out at the whole time. But I think I did have mentors, and I freely admit it. I mean, people who really helped me and get to where I am. Fred Brander, obviously, Jim Clendenin, Bob Lindquist, Richard Sanford. The
real giants of this area.
Yeah, the giants of this area. Mickey Dora, who really took me under his wing. He was the representative for Mouton Rothschild in the U.S., and he had a son who was about my age. They were estranged, and he really took me on and gave me tons of advice. He actually became the godfather of my son. He just died recently at 106.
Wow.
Great guy, but a person who I could always ask questions of, and who always straightened me out when I wasn't. I don't understand this thing sometimes about people who are winemakers. I mean, it's I always tell the joke. How do you know a winemaker's in a restaurant? He's told everyone. So I don't want to be that guy. And so I'm hopefully I have humility, and I want to be good at my craft, but I also want to be a good member of the community.
I love that. So complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
A day without sunshine.
And now we get to have a lot of fun. I get to have all my fun little questions, but we're sitting at a table.
A table without wine is worthless. I mean, what would you do? Wine is such a perfect beverage for the table. It makes everyone get along better. It helps your digestion. It makes the food taste better. And I'm convinced that if we could sit down more often with people and have wine and break bread and enjoy meals together, we would not have this chasm that we have in America right now. There's this huge divide. And when you sit down with people, you reach consensus. You understand their points of view, and it's just a better place to be. I love the table, and I unabashedly, and I say this all the time, I make table wine. I make wine for the table. It's meant to be consumed with food, and it's made to be consumed with friends and with family. And that's just on everything you read that I write. That's why all my back labels made to be consumed. You drink this with your friends and family at the table where it belongs.
I love that. Well, speaking of a table, we're sitting at a table. There's a bottle of your wine on the table and an empty seat next to you. And I'm curious, who from any walk of life, living or deceased, would you want to share a bottle of Margerum wine with?
Well, I've met a lot of people, and especially in the restaurant business, but, Stephen Hawking was probably the most famous and most incredible person that I met. I thought he was just...
So he's already had your wine?
Yes, he has. Yeah, That's true. That's a good point. I didn't think about that. I think... I don't know. I'm just thinking of all the biography, living or dead, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Famous or unknown?
I mean, it'd be fun to drink wine with Winston Churchill, obviously. I don't know if he'd give me the time of day, but if he did, I'd want to drink wine and hang out with him. He was a fascinating guy.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of historical figures I would love to know what they were really thinking.
Absolutely.
But,
So now comes that question about the deserted island. What 3 wines would you want to take with you? Now you get to tell me.
Okay, so but now my wines or any wines in the world?
Any wines, any 3 wines you'd want to have.
Okay, so one of them would be M5 Red.
Okay.
Because I made it and I love to see it, and I always love M5 Red because every time I go back to it, it's changed in a very subtle way. I mean, there's 5 grapes, they mature differently, and it never goes bad. And it just, if I had to live with one of my wines for the rest of my life, it would be M5 Red because I always find something interesting about it. Even like I'll drink a bottle at the winery and it's never left that facility, then I'll be in Chicago and I'll drink the same vintage, the same wine.
And you get something different.
It's something different because it's aged differently. It's in a different atmospheric pressure. It's in a different, world. It's traveled. So I love to see the nuances that particular wine. It's a wine I know very, very well, obviously, because I've been making it for 23 years and also have tasted it a lot of times and tasted older vintages. I think that to exist without a bottle of really high quality champagne would be remiss. I mean, I think probably Krug Manil would be my pick.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's I can't drink it very often now because it's so exorbitantly expensive. But Krug Manil would be that choice, and then to have a red wine, it would have to be some of the greatest wines I've ever had were from Domaine Romanée-Conti, so maybe a Latache, because
why not?
Yeah, I get to choose.
Well, now we get to play a little game. I didn't warn you about this, so I'm going to catch you off guard. But you said you listen to music in the winery, not country music. And a lot of times, music creates an emotion, wine creates an emotion. So I want to pull out a couple of your wines, and I want you to tell me what you'd want to listen to or what it would make you think of. And since I've been sipping your sparkling wine, your Barden sparkling wine, tell me what we should be listening to.
Well, obviously it's classical music for this one. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, it sounds pretentious to say Beethoven's Fifth or something like that, but something Vivaldi or something like that. I think sparkling wine and really good champagne deserves that orchestral kind of pairing.
And what about your Riviera Rosé?
Well, so interestingly, we don't have speakers outside here, but if you were inside, you'd be listening to my playlist, which I make both tasting groups play my playlist. And quite interestingly also is that it comes from me being in France a lot, and I'm in a little bar, I'm in a beach club or something like that, and I hear a song and I Shazam it, and then I add it to my playlist. And so a lot of the music on my playlist, I don't necessarily know the artist, and I couldn't even tell you who they were because I don't know their work. But it would be listening to the Margerum playlist, sitting outside at the tasting room, drinking rosé, because the music is just. I tell you, I get more compliments on my playlist. It's a little not disco-y, but it's a little beach clubby, and but it's very, very avant-garde music that most people are not used to listening to. Nothing like the 80s pop or the classic 90s or pop hits or anything like that. It's most of the music when we're done here, I'll show you my playlist and you'll go, never heard of any of these people. And neither have I. But I've built through years and years and years of listening to music of saying, oh, I love this song. And I add it to my playlist, and it just keeps building.
I love it. Well, we have playlists, but tell me your M5 Red.
M5 Red. And it's almost like it's like a rhythm and blues thing. Maybe not even rhythm and blues. I'm thinking of going to the Jazz Fest and listening to that music, or even when I go to Jazz Fest, I'd never go to all the other venues were so crowded. I'd always go to the gospel tent, and I think that music with gospel might be that wine with gospel might be a pretty good match.
I love it. Now I want to go drink that.
Yeah, we have plenty of wine.
Well, you've been fantastic. It's been such a joy chatting with you, but I have one more question that's kind of a two-parter. Okay. The first is, you have traveled all over the world. You have drunk wine all over the world, but I'm wondering if there's one wine region that's at the top of your bucket list to go explore.
That I haven't been to?
Or maybe you want to return to.
Yeah, I mean, Burgundy obviously is unbelievable. The food is great, the people are great. The way they make wine and the very family and tiny orientation of it. Obviously, Bordeaux is syndicates; they're big wineries. It's a whole different kind of business. I like the Burgundian model, but I think obviously going to Champagne is pretty special. It's also relatively larger concerns, but when you get down into the grower-producer level and you're visiting these small guys who are making wine in their basement, it's pretty amazing.
And is there anywhere you haven't been yet that you want to go to?
I have not been to Australia. I hate to admit that. I've been to Spain, I've been to Portugal, I've been to Italy, I've been to every wine region. I've been to New Zealand. I just have never been to Australia, and it's really it's a whole. I mean, I think, obviously there's some, we could bitch and moan about Australia especially for what they did to the Syrah business by making an abundant of really horrible wine.
With an animal.
Right. But there's a lot of really great wines made in Australia, and I would like to go explore that.
And for somebody who wants to come here and explore Los Olivos and taste Margerum wines, where can they find you? Where can they taste your wines? And what will they experience?
So I think the best thing to do is go on our website, obviously. Go to Margerum. There's nothing else on the website besides Margerum. And as you saw here, we do this bento box wine and food pairing. We have a very talented sushi chef here that's 3 minutes away, and she does a freshly cut sashimi and then sushi, and then eel and wraps and rolls and Korean pork and the whole schmeal. And we do a pairing with that, and it requires a day in advance. But I think if you're going to come to Los Olivos, there's 51 tasting rooms in Los Olivos, so there's a lot of
that many here now.
Yep, there's a lot of places to go taste wine, but there's only one place where you can do a wine pairing with a bento box from one of the best sushi chefs in town, and that's here. We also do offer an oysters and sparkling wine experience, which is pretty amazing. So I think if you really want to come to Margerum and a lot of my colleagues all make really great wine, and there's a lot of places to taste, but the really thing special about Los Olivos is this food and wine pairing. In Santa Barbara, we obviously have a chef and a kitchen and a whole menu, and that's a great experience too, but a completely different set of, it's much more casual food, and we've got salads and panini sandwiches and pizzas, and it's really fun. The food's really light and terrific.
Go to Margerum for the wine and stay for the food.
There you go. I like that.
And what is your tagline?
Wine is good living.
Well, Doug, thank you. Wine is good living. Thank you for joining us on Wine Soundtrack, and cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.